I want to see a raise of hands here. Has anyone ever seen the show Hoarding Buried Alive? It's a show called Hoarding Buried Alive. Anyone seen it? It's a show about hoarders, people who collect a lot of things, and it's a very extreme case. People who really love collecting things to the degree where they can't even walk in their own houses. That's how bad the hoarding is. So, a few weeks ago, my brother Peter was here, and him, my dad, and my husband Alex, they went to his family's house to clean out the garage, and it looked like a scene from the show Hoarding Buried Alive. So, if we can show the video here, I just want to show you guys a quick before video of what it looked like. You can't really walk in there, can you? Good luck finding anything. If you need some tools, it's a bit of a tough job to find anything you need. So, not to put my dad on the spot, he's not a hoarder, I promise. My mom will not allow him to get to that point. However, it got to that point where he used that garage space as a things to pack some stuff that he doesn't normally need, right? So he used it to just store a couple tools that he hasn't used in a few years. And then that kept adding up, and then eventually the garage ended up looking like that. So I want us to also show the after video of what it looked like after hours of work. Yeah, you can walk in there, some organization, yeah. Give a round of applause to Peter and Alex, actually. So unfortunately, the problem with my dad was that he kept things in there that he had a really hard time getting rid of. Things that he's kept for years, tools, items, stuff that he said, oh no, I promise I'm gonna need it in like a few years. I promise it's important, I should keep it. And so my brother kept asking him, okay, Dad, when was the last time that you actually used this? And he had to think for a minute and said, oh, I don't know, maybe a few years ago? So Peter said, okay, throw it out, get rid of it. You don't need it anymore. So after a long process of doing all that, eventually they were able to get to this wonderful space where they could clear it out and they could actually walk through. So after hours of hard work, it was now actually effective for its use, right? We know garages are usually a space for organization, for storage, and also for your car to possibly be stored in. So when our environment is cluttered, becomes quite difficult to focus, right? Good luck finding a tool that you need in that garage. I couldn't find it. Because when our environments get cluttered, it becomes quite hard for us to focus. Because a cluttered mind becomes a cluttered heart. And when our minds become cluttered, it's difficult for us to function at our optimal value, right? We get overwhelmed. There's too much going on, so you cannot focus on what you need to do. Some of us sitting here, we need to declutter in order that we may have a better focus of what's important instead of being distracted by the mess. Distraction is something that prevents someone from giving their full attention, right? It's an interruption, a disturbance, an intrusion. It's something. The Greek word for distraction is perispedo, and unfortunately my dad is not here to correct me, but perispedo, which means to be pulled in several directions, taking one's appetite somewhere else, right? A lot of us think distraction just means you can't focus. Distraction actually doesn't mean you can't focus. It means a mismanagement of your focus, right? It means you're able to focus on something, but what you're focusing on is just on the wrong thing. A lot of moms might relate to this one. You know, you have a child that's on their phone, right? What happens when you're talking to someone that's on their phone? They're texting. You're trying to talk to them. What happens? They're distracted, right? So when you're speaking with someone who is distracted, I'm trying to have a conversation with you. I'm either not going to hear or understand what you're saying, or I'm going to misunderstand what you're saying, right? The same thing happens when you're doing something important while you're distracted. That includes distracted driving. I'm a nurse. Say I'm distracted doing something important like giving medication, or you're a construction worker doing something while distracted. It could be detrimental. You could have a poor outcome or a poor result. So distraction leads to lack of clarity, understanding, poor performance, and poor outcome. See, the unfortunate reality is some of us, we get distracted for a variety of different reasons. It's pretty valid. So sometimes we get distracted because, unfortunately, maybe we don't really care about the conversation that we're having with a person. Maybe the show you're watching is not quite interesting enough. You don't really keep up with the plot. Maybe you find a task that you're doing quite boring, so you'll get distracted. Or maybe you have so much on your mind that what you have on your mind surpasses what the conversation that you're actually having, so you get distracted by that. So for most of us, we give our full attention to something we like, we enjoy. My brother Peter, he loves sports. Whenever he's watching a sports game, this guy is glued to the TV. You cannot get him to have a conversation otherwise because his focus and his attention and his heart is on that game. Whatever our interests are, whatever you love, that's what you're going to focus on. That's what is going to have your whole heart, your attention, everything. In this world, we all know that everything is trying to capture our attention. Our attention is a very important commodity. You open your phone, something tries to capture your attention. You watch TV, you open a magazine, you go anywhere, you go to the shopping mall. Everything's trying to capture your attention. It's important because your attention is something of value. Your attention to advertisements means money. Your attention is something of value, right? So my question is, how is our spiritual attention? Are things like reading, praying, spending time in God's presence, is that something grueling or painful or difficult in order to focus, or is it something that we're so easily distracted by? My other question is, what is it that has our full attention? I'm not saying half our attention. What is it that has your full attention? There's something for everybody, right? What do we spend most of our minds and our time on? The opposite of distraction is traction. Traction is the action that moves us towards what we really want. Distraction pulls away, attraction pulls towards. And we know that the enemy wants us to look at everything and anything else apart from Jesus, right? Things like people, circumstances, mentalities, and most importantly, and things that a lot of us don't sometimes realize, is ourselves. One of the biggest ways that the enemy keeps our eyes off Jesus is to look at ourselves, my problems, my issues, my life, my goals, my dreams, my money, my family, fill in the blank. So today we're going to be talking about 4 different types of distractions, okay? We're going to talk about distractions caused by forgetfulness, distractions caused by life, busyness, distractions from storms, and distractions based on impulse. So the first group of people we're looking at today is Israel. Israel is a really, really good example of spiritual ADD, I guess you could say, a spiritual attention deficit disorder, right? They were distracted by every shiny idol, every pagan god. They were like, ooh, that's interesting. Let me just go grab onto that. They were constantly swaying from God and were clinging to everything that would capture their attention. I don't know if you guys have ever seen children, babies in particular. A lot of them have a really poor attention span, and they'll actually get really attracted to shiny and eye-capturing things, right? And for some reason, it usually happens to be dangerous things, right? Things like knives or fire. You see babies, they immediately want to grab that. And so you have to pull it out of their hand and say, no, that's dangerous. You shouldn't, you don't want to do that. That's not good for you. And so we see Israel was actually a lot like this. They were so busy grabbing onto dangerous things that were actually going to hurt them in the long run. So we know that distraction usually leads to waste, right? The enemy wants us to waste our time, waste our purpose, waste our energy, waste all these things, right? Because when you become distracted enough, you will lose motivation. You will lose your fire. You will lose your drive. And you will forget your purpose. When you get distracted enough, you usually become forgetful. Has anyone ever gone into a room, say I don't know, you need to get something from a room, so you go into it, you get distracted by something, and then you're like, wait, what did I need to come into this room for again? Right? It's the same concept, because when you get distracted, you can sometimes forget what your purpose is. And that is exactly what happened to Israel. They became impatient. Think of the story when Moses was on the mountain and they were waiting for Moses to come down from the mountain, right? Moses went to get the 10 Commandments and they were waiting. And they became forgetful. They forgot what their purpose was. They became impatient. And so as a result, they became distracted and built that golden calf. They ran after pagan gods. And so as a result of their distraction, they forgot their purpose. They forgot their purpose, which led them to be distracted and lose their motivation and fire for God. And they didn't realize that the danger that happened as a result of the attraction to those pagan gods. Do we sometimes forget our purpose and become distracted? A lot like Israel, because we're so attracted to all these little things that we forget our purpose. You forget why you're here. You forget why we open the Bible daily. We forget what this is all about. The next group of people, if you have your Bibles, you can turn your Bibles to Luke 10, chapter 39 to 42. Very famous story. It's about Mary and Martha. When Jesus comes to visit Mary and Martha, they hosted a dinner for them, as in tradition, as in Middle Eastern culture. We love to host people at our houses for dinner, for food. It's a sign of respect. It's a sign of hospitality, right? So open up your Bibles and we can read from verse 39. It says, "She had a sister called Mary, who was seated at the Lord's feet, listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with all her preparations, and she came up to him and said, 'Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Then tell her to help me.' But the Lord answered and said to her, 'Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her.'" As a Middle Eastern woman, or part Middle Eastern woman, hospitality is a very, very important thing in our culture. We have a lot of Middle Easterns here, or people of culture that know the value of hospitality, right? It's something that's very important to us, because when you host someone, it's a sign of respect when you serve them, right? It's a sign, it's almost like a reflection of yourself and your household when you really give a good hosting for that person, whether it's even just a friend, a family, or especially someone of high honor, right? We try sometimes to even outdo each other with how well we can host, right? I know we've seen that so many times. And especially back then, women in particular, and even now still, women in particular are known to serve the men, right? That's just what you do. It's in our culture, right? And if a woman is not serving and she's not participating, she's considered lazy. I know I've seen in my own household, sometimes when my aunts get together and we have like a family function, if we see someone sitting, they'll sometimes give a side eye to somebody that's not working because you're considered quote unquote lazy, which is not a good thing. So Martha wasn't, quote unquote, doing anything wrong, right? She was just doing what she was supposed to do. She's doing what any woman would want to do for having a guest of high honor in their home. She's just taking care of the house. She's serving them. She's doing her part. And so one thing we can assume is that Martha knew who Jesus was. Martha was close with Jesus. Their family was close with Jesus. She very well knew who Jesus was, that he was the King of Kings. He was the Rabbi of Rabbis. And this was not just any ordinary guest. This was someone of high value and honor, that she had to put the best food. She had to put the best linen, the best clothes, the best everything, because this is Jesus. This isn't just some random guest. And so there was a lot of pressure on her to perform. And Martha, again, was doing the best that what she knew and how she thought to help, even though in reality she was distracted. And again, likely, not just distracted by the preparations. There's probably a lot on her mind, because it says that she was worried about many things, right? She was probably worried about the health of Lazarus, her brother. She was probably worried about the reflection that this might look on her and her household. She was probably worried about the performance and what that would look like and how she would be perceived by Jesus, and so many things that we don't know. And so all these things caused her to miss what was actually right in front of her. And so Martha asked, "Lord, do you not care? Do you not care?" And to be honest, I don't blame her. Quite honestly, again, she's not asking anything absurd, anything ridiculous. She's saying, don't you care? Things aren't going to get done if Mary doesn't help me. Nothing's going to be finished if Mary doesn't help me. Valid point. A lot of us are just like Martha, and we think, "Lord, Do you not care? Do you not care about the problems I'm facing? Do you not care about this issue, this situation? Do you not care about the state of the world? Do you not care about this family? Do you not care? Do you not care? Do you not care? And Jesus was likely thinking, of course I care. That's why I'm here. But you are so distracted that you can't even see what's right in front of you. You don't see me. And again, Martha wasn't doing anything quote unquote wrong. She was doing what was expected. And it was actually Mary that was in a sense out of line, because women weren't the ones that were supposed to go sit with the men. They were supposed to be in the kitchen, helping, preparing. But what does Mary do? Mary actually breaks the tradition. She breaks the role, and she goes and she sits at the feet of Jesus. Martha had so much mental clutter that she lost what was sight of the purpose of Jesus' visit. Because Jesus wasn't there to expect the best meal. He wasn't there to expect the best 5-star service. He wasn't even there to expect to be served, but to serve. And Jesus said that Mary chose the better thing. Essentially, Mary chose the better thing to worry about, which was Jesus. Seemingly good things can distract us from being at the feet of Jesus. And Mary, it's interesting, Mary wasn't worried about food, right? Clearly she wasn't worried about food if she was sitting at Jesus' feet. But it's interesting because she was being fed by the Word, Jesus himself, because he is the bread of life. Clearly she didn't worry about food because she was already being fed, and she did not need to worry about what was going on in the kitchen. The next group of people, or person. A lot of us in this room and in our lives in general, we experience a lot of storms. Storms are the number one thing that can actually sway our attention, right? A great example is in Matthew 14, 26 to 31. It's when Peter was walking on the water, right? We all know the story. Peter, there was a storm going on in the sea, and the disciples were on the boat, and they see Jesus walking on the water. And so Peter says, Jesus, call out to me, and I'll come to you. And so Jesus asks Peter to go out to him, and so he starts walking on the water as long as he's looking at Jesus. The second he turns his eyes off of Jesus and looks at the storm, he starts to sink. And we all know storms are consuming sometimes. When you're going through difficulty, you're going through hardship, it is so overwhelming and consuming to look around you. So quite honestly, sometimes it's a little bit hard to say, just look at Jesus when you're in the storm. It seems a little off-putting to say, look at Jesus, when the waves are crashing down on you, when you are half drowning and you're struggling to be afloat, and they say, look at Jesus. When your life is only filled with sunshine, you'll become like a desert. Too much sunshine for anything is not good. Too much of anything is not good. But when there's too much sunshine, it becomes like a desert. But when there are storms in life, for those who are planted, a storm becomes a lot like watering. It's not really a storm for those who are planted. It becomes more like a watering. And so my question is, are we drowning or are we being watered? Because the enemy wants to drown you. He wants us to be suffocated by it. But Jesus calls us to walk on the water and to be watered. We know that God is a God of comfort. He's the God of healing. He's the God of restoration. He's the God who is near to the brokenhearted and binds our wounds. Amen? But some of us come to church because we view God as a relief. That's not a bad thing necessarily, right? We come to God with our problems. We come to God when we're going through storms. But the problem is when you view God as just a relief, as soon as you get that relief, you leave. You only care about God's hand and not his heart. And God is a bit tired of Tylenol Christians, right? You take a Tylenol to relieve the symptoms, you feel better, and you're on your way, right? God doesn't want a Tylenol Christian. Christians that pop Tylenols relieve the symptoms instead of allowing God to do the brain surgery he actually needs to remove the tumor. God says, I don't want to just treat your symptoms. I want to treat your whole life. When we're burnt out, we're exhausted, we're distracted, we're drained. God doesn't want to just fix the superficial, fix the problem. Just like Martha was expecting Jesus to fix the superficial problem, Jesus wanted to fix her many worries instead of just asking Mary to go help her in the kitchen. And he wanted to get to the deeper issue instead of the superficial. And so a lot of us need to allow God to go treat that deeper root issue. Do that brain surgery instead of taking that Tylenol to go get that relief. We just sang the old hymn, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Such beautiful lyrics. It says, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Beautiful. It almost exemplifies the story of Peter walking on the water, right? Because when he looked at Jesus, the storms became dim. Everything became lighter. He was able to actually walk instead of drown, right? So I'm not saying we forget the storm. Jesus is never the one to actually dismiss your pain. But what he's saying is, I want you to shift your vantage point. Instead of ignoring, forgetting about the storms or responsibilities, God is saying to change your vantage point, to look at him as the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Because Jesus is the lighthouse. When you're in a storm, when you see a lighthouse, that is your saving grace. You have to look to that lighthouse to get to shore. He is our anchor, because when we have that anchor is that stronghold in the midst of the storm, in the midst of the waves. He is the thing that holds us fast. Our next form of distraction is impulse. If you have your Bibles, you can turn to Genesis 25, verses 29 to 34, and we can read. When Jacob had cooked a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, please let me have a swallow of that red stuff there, for I am famished. Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, first sell me your birthright. Esau said, behold, I'm about to die, so what use then is this birthright to me? And Jacob said, first swear to me. So he swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. For those of you who don't know, in Hebrew culture, the birthright is the one who receives the double portion of the inheritance. And this usually goes to the firstborn son of the family, right? So they don't just get the financial double portion. They get this to become the spiritual leader of the household when the father dies. They get the political status. They get the spiritual status. They essentially become the priests of that household. So it's a big deal in Jewish culture to get that birthright. It's not just the financial gain. And we know that also other children still receive something, but it's the firstborn that receives a double portion. You know, as a child, you'll still get something, but the firstborn receives the double. And we know that Jacob knew the value of the birthright, and he did whatever it took to attain it. And we know that with this birthright, Jacob is the son of Isaac. Isaac is the son of Abraham. And we know that God made a covenant to Abraham, and that covenant would be passed down by each firstborn. And so then that covenant was supposed to go to Esau, but Esau traded it for a bowl of lentil soup so Jacob could attain that covenant. And so that covenant was something so important and so special that actually that covenant was the lineage of which the lineage of Christ would come. And Jacob understood the value of it. Jacob understood what that was. And see, he said, I need that at all costs. I'm going to take what that is because I see the value and I'm going to go for it. And we know that Esau was described as despising his birthright. He said, I'm about to die. What good is this birthright to me? And he sold it for a bowl of lentil soup. That's a little cheap on my scale of things. And we know that Esau was fixed on the present. He was fixed on the carnal, the temporary. He didn't see the value of what was eternal. He didn't see the value of the birthright. And so he easily sold it for something as simple, as carnal, as instant gratification, as temporary as a bowl of soup. Esau was distracted by his physical needs, his carnality, his need for instant gratification to think about the things of God. Esau was so distracted about his physical to even care about the spiritual. And we see later on in Genesis that Jacob ended up tricking his father in order to attain his blessing because he knew that Esau gave him the birthright, but he wanted to receive the blessing from his father, Isaac. And then when it was about time for Isaac, he was old, it was time for him to give his blessings to his children and for Esau to receive the birthright. Esau walks into Isaac's tent, and he says, "Okay, Father, now it's time for me to receive my blessing, receive my birthright, and I'll be on my way." Esau only walked in when it was time to receive the physical. He walked in when it was time to receive the financial status. He walked in when it was time to receive the political status. He walked in when it was time to receive what he thought was due to him in the physical. He only valued the physical as per the bowl of soup. And then unfortunately, Esau realized a little too late that he wanted that birthright. He realized it was already given away and that he also wanted it for the wrong reasons. And so we see that he later begs his father, "Please bless me also." He realized too late that that birthright was no longer his. And so he begged his father for a blessing. My question is, what is your bowl of lentil soup? It's an interesting metaphor, your lentil soup. What is your physical instant gratification that you are trading for instead of something glorious and eternal that is meant for us? Will we miss it when we had the chance? Will we miss it when we had the chance to trade it for the temporal and carnal, and we didn't see the value? We didn't see the value of that birthright. We didn't see the value of God. We didn't see the value of any of this, and so we traded it for that instant gratification. It's interesting. Hebrews 12:16 says, "See that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau." It describes Esau in this light, and I found it interesting. I'm like, why are they calling this, labeling Esau as these things? And so we know that if we read in Genesis, Esau actually marries pagan wives. And that was something that was very severely, it wasn't encouraged in that culture. They wanted you to marry within the Hebrew race, right? They didn't want you to marry pagan wives. And so that was something that was so poorly discouraged. And so it says that, see that no one is sexually immoral or godless like Esau, because that represents a heart that is divided from God and his desires. And so that's why when you, I'm not so sure where this is, please, if someone knows, please shout it out, where it says, God hated Esau but loved Jacob. Why does he say that? God doesn't hate anybody. But he loved Jacob because Jacob saw the things of God and he went for it at all costs. And Esau sold it for instant gratification. He did not care about the things of God. He didn't even give it a second thought and said, "Here, I'll take it over this bowl of lentil soup. This looks good enough. I'm famished, and what's important now is my hunger. What's important now are my desires, my carnality, my feelings, my emotions over God's." And so God hated Esau and loved Jacob. Both were sons. Both were sons. And both were entitled to some kind of blessing, but only one received the birthright. Will we realize too late, like Esau, what could have been ours, but we so easily traded for the temporary, for the carnal, because that is what the weeping and the gnashing of teeth is. And we can't be like Esau and say, "I was tricked. I didn't know any better." When we so freely choose to give it away like Esau, we have no one to blame at that point but ourselves. Are we so distracted with the right here, the right now, that you don't even care to understand God's plan and purpose, and so you miss it? Because Esau didn't even care to even understand. He's like, "Here, take it. I way prefer that bowl of soup. So I ask you again, what is your bowl of soup? We talk a lot about spiritual warfare in this church. We talk a lot about how the spiritual life is a battlefield. It's a daily battlefield. And we know that we're soldiers. This is not a walk in the park. This isn't sunshine, daisies, and rainbows. Being a Christian is actually quite difficult. It is warfare. And we know that in warfare, it is detrimental for a soldier to be distracted, right? Because there is so much going on in war. If a soldier even gets distracted for a moment, it could be detrimental. There could be casualties. There could be so many things that happen if you are distracted for even just a moment. And we know that the enemy will do anything to kill, to steal, to destroy, and to catch you off guard to lose that focus. The walk of faith is something that requires our undivided attention. It's something that requires that full focus. That's why it says we fight the good fight, we run the race. Hebrews 12, 1-2 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance, with focus, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on who? On our problems, fixing our eyes on that thing that I want, fixing our eyes on the past, fixing our eyes on my goals. What are we fixing our eyes on? Jesus. Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." If the enemy wants the enemy wants distracted Christians. Very easy, very plain and simple. Why? What happens when you're distracted as a Christian? You become powerless. You become easily manipulated. We can't afford to walk around without mental sobriety because we have an enemy. We can't afford it. We can't afford to be distracted. We can't afford to be distracted in warfare. We can't afford to be distracted when there is an enemy that is prowling, looking for someone to devour. Now, if one of the advantages of being a follower of Christ is to hear God's voice, what do you think the enemy's going to do? He's going to do anything he can to distort God's voice and to prevent us from hearing it. What voices are you giving ear to? There's so much noise in this world, so many noises we're listening to, voices we're hearing. Our own voice, people's voice, the world's voice, the enemy's voice, so many voices. I remember years ago, I can't even remember when, probably back in like 2016. This is when I was in youth. We had a youth event that our good brother Jack, when he was the youth leader, he put on this amazing youth event for us in the old church, and it was basically this giant escape room. Has anyone been to an escape room before? They're quite fun. Basically, it's a room that you have to try to solve some puzzles and things in order to escape it, right? And so they put this together by themselves, and it was incredible. And I remember this one part of the escape room was that we were all trapped in this room, like maybe 30 of us, and we were squished together. And there was this radio. And in the radio, it was staticky, but you had to listen in order to hear a message, which was the clue to help you solve the clue to get out of the room. So we all had to listen, but it was staticky. So there's 30 of us in here, and we're all chattering, trying to figure it out, and we're all saying, "Guys, just be quiet." And there was silence. And as soon as we were quiet, among the static, we had to tune in and listen really carefully. If someone made a noise or sneezed, we said, "Shh." But finally, we were able to hear and understand what it was. What was the clue? To be honest, I can't remember the clue. But we were able to get out. In order to focus, a lot of us need to quiet the distractions. It's not that we can't hear. A lot of us, God has given us that spirit. We can hear, but we need to quiet the voices, quiet the distraction in order to hear. So my question is, are we giving ear to too many voices that are distorting God's voice? What are you giving your ear to? Did you know in Hebrew, the word focus, to focus, means centralize? It means to centralize. I thought that was interesting. So when you're saying, I'm focusing on the Lord, you're really saying, I've made him my center. To be focused is to have him at the center. How do we identify fruit for the most part? Most fruit, we can agree, has seeds in the middle. Not all fruit, some things like strawberries don't count, but most things that we identify as fruit have seeds in the middle. Because seeds of the fruit are in the center. And when the fruit starts to grow, it grows where? From the inside out, from the seed out. Because whatever is on the inside is what will be displayed on the outside. That's why if you have a bad seed, it becomes a bad fruit. And so my question is, maybe the reason some of us struggle with things like anxiety, with fear, with lust, with sin, with all these different problems that we're facing is because maybe that is at the center instead of Christ. My question is, what is your fruit? And what kind of fruit is it producing? What are you centralizing and what is at your center? Jesus said, I am the light of the world, right? He said, I am the light of the world. And we are called children of light. I was supposed to have a prop for this, but hopefully you guys will get the image by the the slide. So if we are the light of the world, right? We are light. We are children of light. Has anyone, when they were kids, I know some kids used to do this, you've taken a magnifying glass and you shine it on light and you point it towards the ground. What starts to happen? Great. Now, if we are the light, when the light focuses, like in a magnifying glass, it starts a fire. We start to burn for what we are focusing on. And so if we, being the light, start to focus, we centralize on Christ, that is what will burn. That is what will be our focus, and that fire will start. That fire of God is what will start to burn and consume us. And so, unfortunately, it works the same way in reverse. You focus on the problem. You focus on that sin. You focus on yourself, that's what's going to start to burn. Because whatever you centralize, whatever you focus on, that is what you will burn for. That is what will consume you. What happens when the devil sees God's people start to burn for him? He sends fire fighters, also known as distractions. Because if the light stops focusing, the fire will stop. That is why the enemy wants to distract us. That is why he cares so much about preventing us from burning for him. Because do we even realize why fire scares the enemy so much? Why does he hate fire? Why does it threaten him so much? Because fire is a prophetic reminder of the enemy's end. Fire is a prophetic reminder of the enemy's end. So he will do anything he can to prevent us from being a fire. Could we be so tormented in our mind because of what we're focusing on? Why do you think Scripture says constantly, we read in the Psalms, I look my eyes up into the hills where my help comes from? It says, he dresses the lilies of the fields because it wants us to focus on him, not focusing on ourselves, not focusing on our problem. Again, don't get me wrong. God is not a God of dismissing our pain, dismissing our feelings, dismissing our frustration, but he says, stop looking at that, stop centralizing that, and keep your eyes on me. If the band can come, we're almost done. So my question is, how do we reorient our focus? We talked all about distractions, the different kinds of distractions. We talked about the importance of focus and why should we focus? So my question is, how do we reorient ourselves to focus? Number one thing, you will focus on what you love. You will pay attention to what you love. The person you love, the thing you love, the show you love, the song you love. You will pay attention to what you love, right? That's why it's so important. And God is focused on that heart, on that love relationship, because he says, I don't know if you've ever, think back to when you first have your first love, right? When you are first enamored with someone, you're focusing on that person. You're giving them your full attention, your full heart. You're not even worried about anyone else. You're actually so distracted by that person, you can't even think about anything else. People have to shake you and be like, oh, you're in love. That's why you're so distracted. The second one, and this is not particularly popular, but discipline. We actually have to practice discipline as believers. We actually have to take every thought captive under Christ. Meaning you don't just entertain anything and everything that tries to capture our focus. You have to practice discipline, building habits to keep you focused and engaged in the Word, engaged in Him. You're not just going to give ear to anything and everything. And the third one, you're going to remove unnecessary distractions. Think back to when you were in school. When you're studying, what are you going to do when you're studying? You really need to focus. You're going to remove unnecessary distractions. You're going to go to the library. You're going to sit down. You're going to focus. You're going to be in a quiet environment. You're going to remove the unnecessary things that are creating that extra noise, preventing you from giving it your full focus. And the fourth one, when you have purpose, you're a lot less likely to find yourself bored and distracted because you're walking in purpose. A lot of us sometimes we forget our purpose. We forget what this is all about. And so we sit there bored. And when you're bored, you become easily distracted by anything because you have no purpose. And the fifth one, remind yourself and others. This is why we gather here together. This is why the church exists, because we're not called to be a single flame. We're called to be a fire together. A single coal will burn out, but a coal together with other coals will burn. We are called to remind each other, remind ourselves, because guess what? We are humans. You will forget. You will be distracted. You will need reminding sometimes of God's goodness, of what our mission is, what our purpose is. That's why we gather together, to remind each other, to lift up one another, to strengthen each other, because guess what? We are weak sometimes and we will fall and fail, and that is why we need the body. The last thing here. Revelation 6:15 says, "Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed." Has anyone, you're getting ready to go somewhere important, say like a big event, you're getting ready, and then you get distracted while you're getting ready. What happens? And then you find out you've been distracted, and then, oh no, it's time to go, but I'm late, and I'm not ready yet. You're not dressed, and you're not ready because what? You were distracted. Being awake means being focused. Why do you think the enemy is trying so hard to prevent us from being watchful? Why do you think he's throwing all these distractions in? Unless we are focused, we're watchful, we're prepared, and we're not caught up with distractions and these other voices, we will unfortunately be like the one that is a thief in the night for us. A thief comes like a surprise. You're not ready for a thief, but you're ready for a groom coming for your bride. You are prepared, you are awake, you are focused, you are doing everything you need to do to get ready for that groom. But a thief comes only to kill, steal, and destroy. A thief comes as a surprise. Now my question is, will it be like Esau for us, that we miss it the same way? We weren't ready. We weren't focused. And it is that weeping and that gnashing of teeth. My encouragement for us today is don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait. Don't say, I'll do it later. Because quite honestly, later may never come. God could come by the time we're done this service. The Lord could come in 5 years, in 10 years. He could come before I'm even done this sentence. We don't know. But the point is, are we focused on him? Living in an I'll do it later mentality prevents us from living the life and the opportunities that God has for us. Because when a person who knows their end, say they're getting older, they're going to pass soon, they get their house in order. They make preparations, right? For when a person knows their end, it changes their right now. That's why that when you know Christ is coming back, you get your life in order. You get your house in order. You get your heart in order. So I'll actually ask us all to stand at this time. Maybe one of these 4 different types of distractions resonated with you. Maybe you have a heart that is easily distracted. You have forgetfulness. Maybe you're so consumed by the weight and the worries and the burden of life. You have so much going on. Life is so difficult, and so you get so easily overwhelmed and consumed by that. Maybe you're going through such a difficult time. There are some storms in your life that are overwhelming. The waves are crashing in. You can barely breathe and keep afloat from how heavy it is. And maybe you just are impulsive and you care more about instant gratification than about the things of God and the eternal gratification. And so I don't want us to necessarily come up here like it's a habit. At the end of the day, you know in your heart, and I want you to look at yourself. And I want us to be present with him in this moment. And I want us to speak to him directly and say, Lord, you know my heart. You know what I'm going through. Lord, help me to turn my eyes to you and not these things that are consuming me. If you want, you can come up here. Our elders will come and pray for you if you need to reorient yourself today. I'm sure this applies to every single one of us in this room because guess what? We're human beings. And life is busy. Life is hard. Life is consuming, and we will get distracted. Some of us need to do some spring cleaning. We need to clean up the clutter that is in our hearts and in our minds and in our lives. And we need the Lord to cleanse us and to keep our eyes fixed on him.